I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on The Right Way, we are speaking with Judith Mitchell. She is a multi-talented artist, author, and illustrator who expresses her creativity through various mediums such as painting, drawing, mask making, beading, ceramics, and of course, writing. She has a collection of illustrated books that she is responsible for. They include The Thief of Colors, Boville, The Very Possibly True Story of Alfred and Yip, and The Inn of 1000 Spices. We are delighted to have Judith join us today on The Right Way, and we thank the folks at Crown Books for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask folks like you to subscribe to our channel to support writers like her. Judith, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you, Logan. I'm delighted to be here.
Delighted to have you. As I mentioned before we started rolling, that I'm a big fan of your work. And my first question to you, are you a writer who draws or an artist who writes?
Beats me. I I probably at least first was and am an artist, and then I decided I was illustrating books for other people, and I
Mhm.
liked them very well. And then I got some ideas, and I thought, well, just for fun, I'll sit at a computer and write them down.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was really, I had no intention of launching them as books at first. And I sat around, and I would every year or so I'd take them out and edit them and say, this is good, that's bad, get rid of it. The editing
Yeah.
thing. And then I ended up with some stories, and I decided to give it a try. Why not? Really. So I'm illustrating my own stories. So that's kind of fun because I can criticize the writer, who is me.
Exactly. If the book does well, you blame the artist or you blame the writer, and or vice versa. I'm
Yeah, it's a
just
great
kidding.
position to be in.
Exactly, exactly. What I love about your artwork is the fact that it seems very timeless. When I look at your books, they look like they could have been illustrated now. They look like they could have been illustrated 100 years ago. They kind of have that Grimm's fairy tale kind of feel about them. Do you feel the same way? Is that your goal?
I don't have that as a goal, but those are wonderful words to hear. I like that idea very much. I guess when I was small, I was surrounded by picture books illustrated by the real greats like Arthur Rackham and Edmund Dulac, and I loved those pictures. I used to stare at them, and not that I tried to copy them, but I think it just was a very heavy influence on my artwork. I'm not an experimental sort of an artist at all, and I really don't have any yearning to be one. But I love mythology and ancient history and old books. So
Mhm.
those things have probably defined and informed what I do and how I work. But
Ex-
thank you for saying those lovely things. I like that.
Oh, they're heartfelt. They're very, very true. Your website is beautiful. The pictures are amazing, and the pictures in your book are amazing as well. So, who is your audience for these books?
It really is me, but that doesn't count. Some of them are definitely for children. I
Mhm.
wrote a story called Great Grandmother Mouse, which actually was published by the South Korea Montessori group of all obscure places. And that is definitely for children. The others are for, I guess, older children, older, young, not young adults really, 8 to 12 perhaps, and maybe they're ageless parents if they want to pick up a book and say, "This is a good idea.
Yeah.
It's in a book that my kid has. I like it." I hope.
Yeah,
So
well, I think that's part of the fun of reading to your children, is having a book that captures your imagination as well. And I think your text reinforced with your pictures really do that, where the parents could actually even embellish upon the story if they would, if they will. So they're quite creative and they're quite good. And like I said, they remind me of the classics. And you don't see enough of that nowadays for sure.
well, thank you so much. I do appreciate that. I don't draw with anybody else in mind, but I
Mhm.
certainly, as I said, was informed by the early illustrators. Uh, and I love the way they captured as you say, timelessness in those pictures.
Yeah.
And some of the things I've illustrated are actually myths. So I don't feel that for me, there's no other way to depict them than literally. And I guess I try to do it literally so that I capture what I think about them rather than trying to abstract it. And I'm not really painting for an audience. It's just what comes out in me on the paper or canvas.
What is your go-to medium when it comes to creating your artwork? Is it acrylics? Is it watercolor?
I've probably worked in all of them. I think I'm best at simply graphite and white paper.
Mm-hmm.
I got criticized by a professor in an art class saying that I didn't do color very well. And I think he was actually right, or else I made his comment come true, because I don't think I'm as good in color most of the time as I am in black and white.
Well, I enjoyed both. And I think the problem with professors is that they're professional critics rather than professional doers at times, right?
Well, I've said that to myself for a long time, but it doesn't seem to work. No, I enjoy all the mediums, and I have used them all.
Great.
In watercolor, I use them. I cheat with watercolor. I don't think this is really the way a watercolor is supposed to work, but I draw the outline in ink and then I fill in the colors. It's like paint by numbers sort of thing. I don't just go splashing the colors on the paper, because I can't. I don't do it very well.
Right. Tell us a little bit about the thief of colors, since we're talking about colors.
The thief of the colors. I didn't write it. I didn't write it for an audience. I just wrote it because of my feeling that humans are extracting from the earth all the time, and we don't give back. And what's happening is things are going extinct. We don't see the things that humans saw 200 years ago. They're just not around anymore. And to me, that's a major tragedy. It's humanity's downfall. So I expressed that through the story of a little girl who is caring for a beautiful, beautiful garden with all the colors of the rainbow were in this garden. It was a magical garden. And it's a castle. I don't mean to go through the whole plot, but she's the princess of a kingdom which is known for beautiful colors. And she's fine with that. And visitors to she works in the garden. Visitors come to the garden all decked out in jewelry of all sorts, gemstones and coronets and bracelets, etc. And all of a sudden she realizes she doesn't have that. All she has is flowers to her. And so she gets greedy. She goes greedy, and she runs off, and she has a wish through various machinations in the story. She gets a wish, and she wishes for jewelry. And what happens is then she gets rubies, and all the red flowers are gone. She loves sapphires. When she gets the sapphires, all the blue colors are gone. It's just a parable, really, for what we're doing to our own planet, which is so beautiful. We want the materials it gives us and not the beauty too often. And that's what it's all about, really. But it's
Wonderful.
A story. It's a good yarn too, I must say.
Yeah, it's a great yarn and great illustrations as well. You live in a beautiful place. You live in the state of Maine. Do you find inspiration there?
Very much so, yeah. And I have a little flower garden too.
Great. And I understand from reading your bio that you live in a former tavern.
Yes, it is haunted too.
That's the best kind of tavern to live in, because the spirits are all drunk. So
thank you. That explains the things they say to me.
That's awesome.
It's a very old house, and when we first moved in, there were comments made to me from space. They've stopped doing it because I said, look, you don't have anything to do with me. I don't have anything to do with you. I'm sorry you're around to do this. Please go where you belong and leave me alone. So they did.
Good. So you're peacefully coinciding with the spirits at the tavern.
Or else they've left. Or else they're really dead drunk. They're really dead drunk. Yeah.
Exactly. One of my favorite authors is Alice Hoffman. I don't know if you've read any of her works, but they're all set up in New England. in Massachusetts, on the Cape, and in Maine. And I find a lot of inspiration when up in Maine, just looking at that rocky coast, just living through one of the Maine bleak winters is enough to make you find that writer deep inside of you, don't you think?
Yes, because I'm not a skier, and so I don't go outside that much. I love the snow. It's beautiful. It is. But I sit doing creative things inside rather than doing creative things outside. I suppose I could make creative snowmen, but I just don't do that.
And this season, we didn't even have a lot of snow.
No,
So,
we didn't.
yeah,
It was just
exactly.
cold and nasty a lot of the time,
It's
wasn't it?
cold and nasty. And if you've been to Maine in the summer, it's gorgeous. One of these years, I'm going to spend a winter in Maine. I always say to myself, I'll just have to deal with it getting dark at around 3:30 in the afternoon, which is very, very tough. Let's talk about one of your other books. Tell me about Boville.
Boville. Um, Before I say that, I have to say that in the village, the little community in which we had a house for vacations for a long time, there's a huge mountain called Hateful Hill, and the little hamlet is right underneath the mountain. And after 4 o'clock or even earlier, the sun goes behind the mountain, so you can't see the sun. And everybody says, grumble, 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 Hateful Hill. And so a friend was up visiting, and he said, "My, that sounds like a story." But he didn't go further than that. That just sort of stuck in my mind, and I thought, that's true. What an interesting story that would make. So I wrote Boville about a little town which has a huge mountain behind it, which blocks the sun out and keeps the rain in this. This is perpetually rainy weather in this little town called Boville, Boville. But a little brave little girl who knows a witch who lives at the edge of town, and who is the little girl has only known rain. She said, "Why is it always raining in Boville?" And the woman, after a long time, says, "Why don't you go and ask the mountain? Go and ask it yourself." So the little girl takes a perilous journey up the mountain with her cat Oyster, and she gets to the top, and she has thought that the mountain has a rocky profile that might look like an old man. So everybody says, "Oh, that's ridiculous." When she gets to the top, a drop falls on her from the tip of this mountain's nose, or the man's nose, and she yells at it. And all of a sudden, the man wakes up. It was a giant. It was a sleeping giant. And he moves off, and the little girl tumbles back down, having done a brave and wonderful thing for the citizens of her town. She banishes the bad weather and brings in the flowers. And just because of her courage, that's really what it's about. But
Wonderful.
it was fun to write, and I thank my friend who has now left this realm for a very flowery one, I'm afraid. But it was really his idea. So,
well, it's great to take inspiration from that, sort of like fit right into our conversation, that you can take inspiration from your environment. And living near a place called Hateful Hill is quite an inspiration for sure. But I love the story you created out of it, with this very strong character of a little girl who ends the rain and brings the flowers about.
just by losing her temper, I might say.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
don't underestimate the power of a bad temper, right?
Yeah, you're right. Or speaking your mind, really is what it is.
Exactly. That's the New England way. I mean, people in
Mhm.
New England are very forthright. As you know from living up in New England, the heart of New England. I think there's no more New Englandly place than Maine. Let's
Yes,
talk about the very possibly true story of Alfred and Yip. I love this title. It's great.
thanks. Again, this was inspired by the carnage dealt to coyotes in Maine. They are open season. They're open season on bagging coyotes all the time. And I have a friend who is a wildlife biologist whose specialty is predators, and she goes around Maine lecturing people about what benefits coyotes can bring. E.g., if they're near a farm, they will eat the rodents which devour the farm the vegetables. So I didn't. She suggested writing a story, so I did, but I didn't really take it seriously. So I worked on this for a couple of years, and it's about a little abused German Shepherd puppy lost in the woods, the piney woods of northern Maine, who is met and rescued by a coyote pup his own age. And the story goes on. He's taken to his name is Alfred because he goes, elf, elf, elf. And his friend is Yip because Yip goes yip, because he's a coyote. So he's taken by Yip to Yip's lair or den and raised to be a coyote. This is a little German shepherd, and he thinks he's a coyote. And so they become very, very close to each other, he and Yip. And they go off to have adventures, and they end up at an old bachelor farmer's potato farm in the north of Maine. And I think there's several of those. And they get to work eating all the rodents, and they get fat and complacent. The man sees them one day, and they run away, except that the dog doesn't run away. The coyote goes back to his wild roots. The dog stays near civilization because instinctively he's a German shepherd. He's a dog. So somebody comes and shoots at the coyote. The dog is injured. They separate. The dog becomes the dog of the old bachelor farmer. And as it ends up, the coyote comes back and the farmer accepts him. They eat all the rodents, and everybody in Maine thinks it's a good idea. And so coyotes are not the pariahs that they were before. And this was my effort to promote possibly a different perspective on coyotes, because they are quite beautiful. They don't harm you really. They do eat rodents along with insects and berries and things like that. So let's try to accept them for what they are instead of tormenting them. That
Exactly.
was my
And I also think the DNA of a coyote and a dog is so similar, you can't even tell the difference. I mean, basically a coyote is a wild dog.
Exactly.
So,
In fact, they're called the song dogs.
yeah. Oh, they make quite a noise at night.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it the first time. We were COVID transplants, and we moved to a farm up in New England. And hearing those coyotes at night, it's like, wow, what is that? I think I got the answer on Google when I heard the howl, because I couldn't believe it. Yeah,
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is beautiful.
And you can tell the little pups that are howling along because they have a higher yip.
Yeah, it's very high pitched. It's surprisingly high pitched. Oh, no worries.
Okay. I tried to turn it off, but I'm not techie enough to do that.
No problem at all. And I had a question for you while you were talking before about the very possibly true story of Alfred and Yip. I'm presuming you write the text and then write the pictures. Is that how it goes? Or do you write the pictures?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I do. That's the way I work it.
Yeah, that only makes sense.
When I write them, actually, I'm not thinking that I have the pictures in my head. As a matter of fact, it's rather eerie because these characters, which I guess I have created, yes, I have, begin to have a life of their own. Yeah. And I believe that they're really out there. So I draw them as I see them, and they're all integrated. But when I write the story, the universe that I'm creating is forming in my mind. So I don't do the pictures first and then the story.
Do you feel like you've kind of moved into that world when you're writing it and drawing it? Like that's,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's your space at that point, right? It's kind of a fun place to be, don't you think?
Sometimes it is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you write some dark stories every now and then, so I guess.
Well, a thousand spices is a rather dark story, yeah. But that's not for children.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Inn of 1,000 Spices. I like that name as also.
Thank you. The Inn of 1,000 Spices was born of my effort to link two dreams I had, both about spices and eating, several years apart. And it just seemed eerie that I would have those two dreams. Why would I mean, I like to cook, but so I moved them around together to see which one could bounce off of the other one. Could I possibly join them? So the Inn of 1,000 Spices it's a rather long story about a boy who visits Philadelphia with his Dutch uncle. I don't know why that's necessary, but and they wander around. They get lost in Philadelphia and come upon an outdoor, lovely, enchanted restaurant called the Inn of 1,000 Spices. And they go sit down, and there's no menu, but lovely women dressed in strange costumes. This is part of my dream. Come to them with those trays, that are over the shoulder ribbons holding trays, with all these exotic spices. And the women sing to them and say, choose a spice and we will bring you a dish that you will never forget. So they each choose. It's very odd. It's very beautiful. It's all sort of flowery, and there are other people there. Nobody's talking. So the dishes are served and they're delectable, and they are based on whatever spice you chose. Then they leave, and they can never find the inn again. They look for it all through Philadelphia, through the parts of Philadelphia that they've gotten lost in. They can't find it anywhere. And the young boy grows up to a man who is obsessed with finding this inn. And he searches many times on his own, never finds it, and he becomes an archaeologist and travels the world doing digs and explorations, and can find spices, but he's trying to find the story of this inn. He thinks it's haunting him. It's driving him crazy. He finally finds an old manuscript in a library in Tel Aviv. And it's a story about a woman who cooks magical food and her husband who asks her about it. And so she goes into this story about it. But he realizes this is the origin of the inn, is this woman who cooks these. There's too much to explain about this to make any sense to anybody, I'm sure, but he loses his mind gradually because he cannot find the inn. He cannot find it at all, and he spends all his time looking for it. And the end of it is, please, reader, if you know anything about this inn, you must help me find this inn. So it's an open-ended sort of story, but I did link the two dreams, which that was my purpose.
Well, I like it. It's very, very intriguing. Sounds like a place I'd like to go to.
Me too.
Yeah, although I would want to be driven mad by not being able to find it again, that's for sure.
Well, it was so real to them when they were there. He can't believe it doesn't exist.
Exactly. If you were to turn one of your works into a film, which one would you choose to do first?
I think probably The Thief of the Colors. I think that would be a really fun film because it's all full of lovely things. For instance, who doesn't like gorgeous jewelry? I certainly do. And who doesn't like beautiful flowers? And who doesn't lose something all the time and try to find it? Finally, the little girl realizes what she's done. And who doesn't love the earth and lament the fact that things are being destroyed and extracted and not returned? And the diamond industry, the gold industry, oil, all these extraction industries. And what have we destroyed? We've destroyed a lot. We better stop.
And then sometimes people don't appreciate what they have. I mean, the little girl had everything. She just thought there was more to have. And
of a different sort.
Yeah. And what seems to be valuable to some is really not the thing of true value too. I think that's one of the lessons as well.
Yeah, and it was all her personal gain that she was after, not presenting the world with these lovely, lovely flowers and caring for her gardens, which was her hereditary task.
Yeah.
And it's our hereditary task to do this.
Yeah, I think that would be a great film. Would you like to do it animated, or would you like to do it live action with like real actors and stuff?
I'm not sure, actually. I don't know enough about creating a film. I think partly, I don't really know. That's a good question.
It could be both. I mean, because literally anything you can draw nowadays can be created on screen. I mean, if you can imagine it, they can make it with special effects and digital animation, and they can make it look as real as you want. They can make it look as artistic as you'd like. So that would be quite a process. I think you'd love that. Filmmaking.
It would be great fun. I'd love it. Yeah.
I think filmmaking is best when you're the writer, the creator, and the director. The actors are just puppets. Unfortunately, that's a deep little secret. Everybody thinks the actors should get all the credit, but they're the puppets. It's the director's medium for sure. You've got quite an impressive education, so you must hold that in high priority. You went to the Chatham University. You did postgraduate studies in art history, paleoanthropology, world mythology. Why did you decide that you needed that kind of background as an artist?
I didn't link the two. I just was satisfying lots of curiosity on my part.
Mm,
I was at Columbia University in New York working, and we were allowed at that point to take time off from our work. I was a career counselor actually at Columbia, to take a class or two during the day.
mm,
So it was like a smorgasbord to me. I'm curious about a lot of things. Uh, I grew up in New York City, and my father would take us every weekend to a different wonderful spot, like Metropolitan or the Museum of the City of New York, which was his favorite. Museum of Natural History, of course, the zoo, various zoos. So I think it was my father who made us, who cultured that curiosity, who cultivated that curiosity in me. So I've just been curious about a lot of things. So the chance at Columbia to take a course in these things was irresistible. So I did.
mm.
And it wasn't for art at all. I just wanted to, I actually wasn't an illustrator at that point either. Uh, I I had wanted to be an archaeologist when I was a little girl.
Mm.
Uh, so the problem was when I got to graduate school, I couldn't decide which part of the world I wanted to be an archaeologist in or at. So I just took them all, and then I got interested in all of them, and that led to other things and so forth. So here I am
Wonderful.
writing.
Well, I didn't take you for a New Yorker. You don't sound like a New Yorker. You must have been raised in Manhattan, I presume.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
Oh,
Manhattanites
I can
don't
sound
have.
like a New Yorker whenever I want to.
We all can sound like New Yorkers when we want.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Manhattanites generally don't have that accent. It's mostly the outer boroughs who sound like that. Do you agree?
Yeah, to a certain
Yeah.
extent. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And my dad was raised in Manhattan as well. And so I had a similar upbringing. That my dad took me to Battery Park a lot. We would
Yeah.
catch films at Radio City Music Hall. And it's quite a great cultural experience and a great playground for a young mind and for someone who is curious about the arts.
Absolutely is. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting that you were from Manhattan then as well. Is that right?
Well, he was from Manhattan. I was raised in New Rochelle, which is about 10 miles north of
Right.
New York City. Yeah, but we used to take the train in the Stanford local into New York City all of the time. And I began my career working at CBS in New York City. So
Oh,
spent a lot of
terrific.
my career in New York
Yeah.
City. There's no better place to live and work on some levels, just like there's no better place to live and work on many levels in New England as well. Each has its own, attributes
Mhm.
and attractions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? What do you think? What are you looking to create next?
Um, I have another story in mind.
Okay.
I sort of started. Um, I I have a yen for beading these days for jewelry making.
Mm-hmm.
So I've collected a great number of stones and little, actually some ancient things which I like. So I'm looking forward to the summer, which I'm going to spend in my studio, which is a little bit chilly in the winter.
Mm.
So I'll put together all these beads and I hope make things that I like and possibly can sell, and mask making too. I want to get back into that.
That
Um,
sounds great. And will you sell
yeah,
them at some of the local shops or the markets that they have sometimes in Maine?
yeah. This is a quite new venture for me. I guess it's my fourth year doing this. I haven't quite figured out how to do it. I had an Etsy site, but
Yeah.
most of the time in Etsy is for me was spent trying to arrange things and answer things and write sold and put in. It was doing it at Etsy for me. I'm not really very well organized in that regard. I don't know
Mm.
technical things very well. So it just took too much time, and I sold some, but it wasn't really worth it for me. It was frustrating for me to try to figure out how to do it all. So I think I'm going to search for other venues, probably also online, but perhaps not on Etsy. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand. And particularly the creative mind sometimes doesn't work that well. I always say I'm an analog man stuck in a digital world, but
I like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I've kind of learned to do some of the digital stuff. What brought you to Maine?
I married a man from Maine.
Okay, there you go.
Actually, he was born in Georgia, which is strange.
Okay.
So various waves of emigration and immigrations got him up to Maine. And actually, he was a student of mine. I had 2 years teaching at, of all places, a boys' prep school in Massachusetts,
Hmm.
and he was a student. I taught art, and he was a student younger than I. He's 8 years younger than I am,
Hmm.
and I just thought he was a cute little boy, a nice kid. And then by some kind of cosmic intervention, we ran into each other again as adults, and this led to that, and I married him.
Wonderful.
And
That's a great story.
he was living in Maine at the time, so
Yeah,
uh, here I am.
that's terrific. That's terrific. Well,
Mhm.
you sounds like you have a wonderful life between your artwork, your writing, your crafts, and your lovely home there in the haunted tavern. So it's been a complete delight speaking with you. To the folks at home, the name of the books are The Thief of Colors, Boville, The Very Possibly True Story of Alfred and Yip, and The Inn of 1,000 Spices. And Judith, you have a website. Tell the folks at home what your website is again.
It is. I actually have two websites. One is, um, oh dear, this is terribly embarrassing. What?
Well, we will put it on the screen to make sure that the folks at home have it. So I won't
Right.
put you on the spot. Sometimes it's tough to remember, particularly if it's not simple, like judithmitchell.com.
Yeah, it's.
It's a little
I
more
honestly,
complicated than that.
sorry.
No worries. Like I said, we will have it on the screen. Well, Judith, thank you so much for joining me here today on The Right Way.
Well, thank you, Logan Crawford. It's been lovely talking to you, and I appreciate your questions and your answers. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on The Right Way.